Hi, everyone, and welcome to another Innovate NV speaker series. My name is Cara O'Hare. I am Startup NV's Programs Director, and we are putting together this speaker series every month. We cover a different topic around SBIR and the SBIR program. Today, I'm very excited to be welcoming Shaun Sanders. He is going to be talking about the Department of Energy, their SBIR program, and the shifting landscape that we are seeing. So thank you so much for being here, Shaun.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. The way I'll generally do it is I got a bunch of slides obviously to go through. If people have questions, I do have a window open. So some of them I might defer towards the end, but yeah, if anything really stands out and you're like, hey, feel free to put it in the chat and I'll see it pop up and then I can address it as we go. So yeah, exciting times in the grant world. Before we jump in, let's just start by recognizing where we are today in the SBIR landscape. The DOE SBIR STTR program is still one of the most generous and mission critical funding tools available to early stage innovators in the energy, science, and national security spaces. Obviously, we are in a year of transition politically, administratively, strategically. And so, yes, as Kara mentioned, if you're not aware kind of how things are shifting and where the puck is going, that's what we're going to be talking about today. And then also an overview of how the topics are shifting, how to align your presentation with what they want in different phases. And then the goal is by the end of today's session, you should walk away with a refresher of how to navigate the DOE SBIR and how to tailor your SBIR approach for 2025 and beyond. So this presentation is about positioning. But first off, for those of you who haven't met me yet, I'm Shaun Sanders. I'm the managing partner of VentureCraft. I'm also one of the contributing advisors to SBIR.org, which has a bunch of fun free resources and templates and whatnot. I spent 20 years working in sort of the intersection of science, technology, and commercialization, largely in the startup world, Y Combinator, all those fun places. My background is in both law and venture strategy. So my specialty is helping early stage teams navigate complex funding systems like SBIR. Our clients at VentureCraft have raised a little north of $465 million in follow-on funding. And more importantly, for today's discussion, we've maintained a 52% conversion rate from phase one to phase two, which is more than double the national average. So what does that mean? Phase one is just the beginning. Phase one is the beginning. The real game is when you have to figure out, okay, how do we get to phase two? How do we scale this into something fundable beyond a phase one, phase two? And again, we'll talk about that in a bit. A bit of a refresher. I know we have people on this call who are familiar with SBIR, who have done it before, some who have not. So just high level refresher. Small business innovation research, I like to consider or call America's wish list because each participating agency, and there's a bunch of them you see here on the list, their goal or job is to identify needs that they have internally and then look to the free market to satisfy them. And then they invite you innovators to reach out and either solve them with existing technology or reach out and say, hey, I could solve that if you gave me money to do so. So it's a federal program designed for startups, small businesses. It's non-dilutive, which is the best kind of money you can get as an early stage company, because that means they don't take equity. So when you go out and raise venture capital, angel investment, they're going to take equity in your company, but non-dilutive it's as good a capital as you can get, but that's why it's very competitive. It's also good to keep in mind that this is not venture capital. This is patient, milestone-driven capital that exists to de-risk breakthrough innovation. Very different. VCs are all about pour gas on the fire. Let's hit the rocket. Let's go. This is very much about that methodic planning out, achieving those milestones, showing that you can move the needle forward towards ultimately commercialization. Today, we're obviously going to focus on the Department of Energy, but yeah, NASA, NSF, NIH, DoD, there's 11 agencies that participate in this style of funding, and DOE is one of the obviously largest ones behind NIH in terms of the amount of funding that they have to offer. You might have heard SBIR, STTR, and they're very similar in many ways and different in some. So for both of them, you have to be US-based, for-profit, small business, meaning fewer than 500 employees. It's non-negotiable. If nonprofit, if you're a university or foreign owned, you're just not eligible. The key difference between these two is who you partner with. So in SBIR, you can do the work entirely within your small business, although you're allowed to obviously subcontract up to 33% in phase one and 50% in phase two. And in STTR, you're required to formally partner with a nonprofit research institution like a university or a national lab. And that institution can perform or must perform at least 30% of the work. So an important thing to note in SBIR, the principal investigator must be primarily employed by the small business. But in STTR, the PI can be from either the business or the research institution, which does offer a bit more flexibility. So if you are a small business with deep in-house capabilities, SBIR might be a better fit. But if your strength is in collaboration with a university or a lab, STTR is another alternative to look into. Now, again, high level, that's SBIR, STTR. That's what we're getting into. If you're more interested in getting deeper broadly into SBIR, I know that Kara and her team have a bunch of resources. SBIR.org has a bunch of resources. But now we're going to start to really hone in more specifically in what makes the Department of Energy kind of unique amongst the SBIR players. So one thing that makes it unique is that the SBIR through the DOE runs in two separate solicitations each year, known as Release 1 and Release 2. And they're not just duplicate rounds, they cover completely different programs, offices, topic areas. Release 1 comes out around July, asterisk, for those of you following the news and noticing delays that we'll talk about in just a bit. And it includes the offensive science programs, and it covers fundamental research domains like high energy physics, fusion energy, nuclear physics, advanced scientific computing. Like these are the core sort of areas that are covered by Release 1. They tend to be more theory driven, discovery focused, and connected to the DOE's national lab infrastructure. And then in Release 2, that drops, generally speaking, in November, knock on wood. And that covers the applied energy side. So this is where you'll find topics in things like solar, asterisk, wind, asterisk, hydrogen, advanced vehicles through the EERE, fossil fuels, carbon capture, nuclear deployment, grid resilience and storage, waste cleanup, things like that. Again, traditionally, there's a lot we're going to be talking about in a bit about changes and how things shake up or may shake up, a lot of projections. So think of Release 2 is more deployment focused. So it's commercially oriented, deployment focused. The timelines are also different. Release 1 proposals are generally due in October and awarded between March and April. And Release 2 proposals are due in February with awards in July and between July and August. That said, the second thing that kind of makes DOE special is that it is very much focused on commercialization. And what I mean by that is, unlike NSF, NIH, where commercialization can sometimes be vague or deferred to later phases, commercialization is not optional for the DOE. It is required, and it starts in phase 1. The DOE expects a 2-page commercialization plan in every phase 1 proposal, and not just like a fluff piece. It has to be credible and aligned with the agency's mission and have something that can pass the sniff test of this is real beyond, I'm going to ask ChatGPT later to help me figure it out. So you're not just pitching a cool idea or a scientific breakthrough. You are pitching an idea that solves a problem in a real world energy system or a real world energy ecosystem. Keep that with that in mind. Your plan should answer questions like, who's your target customer? You should know your target customer. Who's your end user? What pain are you solving? How does this help to contribute to solving problems with the DOE's national priorities? Things of that sort. And we'll talk about that in depth a little bit more in a moment. So you can think of it this way. If you invented a powerful new magnet, so you have some new powerful magnet technology, the DOE doesn't just want to know it's novel. They want to know if it could maybe reduce rare earth imports or improve transformer design or help fusion reactors work more efficiently. And if you compare that to the NSF might be more interested in, can this advance the field? So yeah, the mindset as you're getting into this, DOE wants to know, can this move the market and the mission? So bottom line, if your commercialization plan is weak or generic, the DOE may decline to even review the proposal. So make sure you take it seriously as you are developing it out. Which brings us to all those asterisks that we had a moment ago. We're obviously facing delays. We don't really know when the delays are going to wrap up. The last that I heard is as of 2 days ago, excuse me. As of 2 days ago, the DOE confirmed through some emails with people that were inquiring that we're looking at like 1 to 2 week delay when it comes to just topics being listed. But when it comes to awards, there's some more ambiguity. So all we know at this point is there are delays. Factor it into your planning. But there have been delays before. This isn't the first time that we've ever experienced delays. They're a little bit different of delays, arguably, but not delays aren't unique. So we've had delays back in 2017, 2018, I believe. It's something where the best you can do at this point is factor it into how you're going to work through your timing. So, for example, if you were looking at, let's see here, let me look at some of my sample dates. So, if you had an award notification for phase one release two, which had a deadline in February 26th of this year. It was originally scheduled for May, but but obviously it's been pushed back. It's still in limbo. Then what we're going to start looking at is the projected start dates of July 8th, which has also slipped. So if you were counting on that award to begin work, now you have like a multi-gap month that you didn't plan for. Build in buffer time. Like the only advice I can provide at this point, build in buffer time. Don't count on hard deadlines. If you're doing any type of early prep work like lab testing, market research, or partnership building, start it now if you can. Delays are frustrating, but they're kind of an opportunity in that given how competitive these awards are, there are going to be many people who are going to wait for certainty in order to start making changes, and that might not give them enough time to actually make those changes. So being aware of them now and seeing what you can get done now is of an advantage for when they finally clarify whatever the dates are coming up. It's the best that we can do, and we are hopeful that it will resolve itself again fairly shortly while they're working on probably rewriting topics and realigning to the current administration's focus. The next thing to talk about as we cover SBIR is TABA. And I hope that everyone here is aware of what TABA is because it is one of the most underutilized strategic tools in the SBIR program. So TABA stands for the Technical and Business Assistance. It's extra money. It is extra money on top of your SBIR award that can only be used to improve your commercialization success. So in phase one, you can request up to $6,500 in additional funding. In phase two, that jumps up to $50,000. And this money doesn't come out of your research budget. It is an add-on as long as you request it properly. And shockingly, many companies do not request it properly. What can you use it for? You can use it for all the stuff that most technical founders need help with. IP strategy, patent filings, customer discovery, market analysis, marketing analysis, competitive research, business model refinement, manufacturing, supply chain planning. The catch with TABA is that you have to name your TABA provider in the proposal, and you have to include a clear budget justification, a letter of commitment, so a subcontractor or a consultant. But the bottom line is that not requesting TABA is leaving money on the table. And also, it shows how serious you are when it comes to commercialization, because this isn't just my opinion as a obviously biased consultant, like elephant in the room. I love TABA because I'm a TABA provider. But you should love TABA too, because according to the Department of Energy, it makes a huge difference. Now, I will apologize for the fact that this has no, the axes aren't labeled on this graph. This was a photo I took at a conference a few years back from the Department of Energy. But the main theme here is you do better with TABA, and the DOE is noticing it and recording data about that. So TABA supported commercialization plans and proposals score higher, full stop. Like, it's not just, oh, they help. They are off the charts in terms of scoring higher when the DOE is deciding whether or not to award funding or an additional round of funding. So again, not anecdotal. The DOE has reviewed thousands of proposals and found that the ones that had meaningful business development input, especially through TABA, were much more likely to advance to phase two than ones that did not. So if you use TABA to develop better business cases, you're more fundable. Your reviewers can see a complete story and not just a technical solution or a science fair project, but like a viable pathway to impact. I'm just going to drill this in, beat this horse dead. If you are applying to phase one, do not treat TABA as a footnote. Treat it as like a core competency of your winning strategy. And sometimes, excuse me, sometimes I hear, well, but what can, $6,500 really do? And I get it. It's not a huge amount of money. Don't get me wrong. It's still a decent chunk. But Something else to keep in mind is the DOE will assess whether or not you utilized phase one TABA in assessing whether or not they will award you phase two TABA. So another reason to go for phase one TABA is just to show that you are utilizing it effectively so that later on, when you ask them for $50,000 in TABA, they will review your file and go, yeah, so this was a good use of money. Let's give it to them. So no reason to use it. I see a question come in. Is TABA only for DOE SBIRs or is it available through other SBIR funding agencies? Great question. It is available through other agencies, not all of them, but many of them. There's a complete list on SBIR.org of which ones offer TABA and which ones do not. And they vary in how they will allow you to do it. Some agencies will require you, like DOD, will require you to use for phase one their pre-selected TABA provider. But for phase two, you can select your own. Other agencies will allow things like post-award selection. So let's say right now you've already received a phase one award, but you forgot to include TABA. For NIH and DOE, you can reach out to a TABA provider, someone like me, someone within the network, and then you can request from your program officer a post-award amendment to add the TABA to it. Other ones, they do not. Oh, I see Kara is offering links into the chat that'll show kind of which ones do. So for the most part, for many agencies, you need to identify it right at the phase that you're going, the phase one or phase two as you're applying. And then a couple of them, NIH, DOE, allow for post-award applications. But yeah, many of them do offer them to do it. I'm just seeing that we have John. I'm seeing some questions about some topic releases. We'll get to that in just a minute. So great question, John. I'll get to that in just a moment as we start talking about later towards the second half. We're going to talk topic strategy, changes in the administration, what we know based on what we've seen so far.
Thank you.
So
absolutely no rush at all. I just wanted.
Oh yeah, no, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. That is a great question that we have many thoughts about. But for now, but first, let's talk about high level difference between phase one, phase two, phase three as you're planning these through. So phase one is all about technical feasibility. So your phase one is that lab bench level proof of concept. The DOE isn't funding full product builds at this stage. They just want to see that the underlying science or engineering problem that you're addressing is actually solvable. They want to believe that you have the right team to solve it. So you're typically at this phase going to receive about $200,000 for 6 to 12 months to answer that very specific question. And your job during this phase is to stay focused. So your job is to not get distracted by all of the many things that might be related to your technology. It's that core critical element, like this thing will unlock the next step or the next milestone. So an example would be if you were building a jet engine. Phase one isn't about building the whole engine. It's about proving whether or not the ceramic turbine blades won't melt at operating temperature. Like it's that sort of direct, specific thing to prove to unlock the rest of the project, the rest of the milestones. The best phase one proposals have a narrowly scoped problem, a clear experimental or modeling plan, defined metrics for success, and a hint of what comes next. Because again, we're trying to get to that phase two. Keep in mind, this is the gateway to phase two, and reviewers are already thinking about if this works, can it be scaled? Is the team credible? Can it tie into a commercial path? And the team thing is important because your biggest enemy in this game is the collective memory of reviewers. And the reviewers don't know you. All they know is all of the other applications that they have reviewed, applications that are on a spectrum of multi-billion-dollar conglomerates with a subsidiary that technically fits within the small business that has a ton of resources and just cranking out SBIRs to newly graduated grad students that have an idea but have never started a business before, have never done anything beyond like mow a lawn. That's who they're reviewing. They don't know who you are, and they're trying to figure out, like, is this person going to use this funding as a way to move a milestone, or are they going to use taxpayer money as tuition to learn how to run a company? So some other things to keep in mind for phase one is that the innovation should be tightly aligned with the DOE subtopic. Don't wander. A common reason to get rejected is if you wander off the thing that you were applying for. You want to scope your effort around a critical feasibility question and define how you will measure success. What are those KPIs? Like, how do I objectively, empirically at the end of this know if it can move forward? It needs to be specific in terms of who's your customer, who's the unmet need, what is your competitive advantage. It needs to talk about all those little core things that you'll get into more depth later when you get into that phase two. What is a phase two? So if phase one is about proving feasibility, then your phase two is all about proving that you can actually scale it out. It's about building and proving functionality. You've shown the concept works, and at this point, you have to make it usable. You may have to make it testable. You have to make it valuable in the real world. At this stage, you get around $1.1 million on average, median amount awarded over 2 years. And the whole point is to develop a working prototype or validated process. So this is where you move out of the lab closer to the market. And you can think like field testing, systems integration, and working with early partners, test beds, things like that. Some key components of your phase two plan is to make sure that you touch on what were the results of your phase one. You start with a clear summary. What did you prove, and how does that justify deeper investment? Like, why should you get more money based on what you've previously done? Then you lay out a milestone-driven plan with concrete technical objectives broken down into intervals, like something specific that can show them that this isn't just a rough idea on a whiteboard. This is something where you just need gas in the tank to execute. The commercialization plan component of this is where many proposals fall short, because you need a real business roadmap. In fact, this is where, going back to TABA, you can really lean on whatever advisor you're working with, because they're looking for more than just boilerplate. They're looking for you to define your target market, who your early customer is. Do you have IP? What is your plan? Bonus points at this stage if you can show letters of support or intent from potential customers, manufacturers, or utilities, things like that. Because these show the reviewers that someone in the real world is paying attention. Someone that is not wasting their time by talking to new technologies has taken the time to talk to you and write a letter and say, this would be great if it was real. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to de-risk this in the mind of the reviewer. And before we talk about the phase three, I just want to really drive home the 4 components of a phase two and the mindset you should have when you are writing your phase two. Because I think a lot of people get so close to it, they lose sense of what the end goal is. It's like the end goal obviously is technically to provide this report that hits the right page number, hits on the right milestone, like this report that conveys what is your plan, what is your vision, so that a reviewer can obviously get an idea of what it is you do and decide, do they believe you or not? Technically, that's what you do. But practically speaking, what you need to have in mind as you are writing these plans is that on the end of at the end of the day, at the end of the road of your plan that you submit, it's a human being reviewer, that's going to be reviewing it, and their biggest fear is being laughed at the water cooler. And I mean that sincerely. And let me unpack that a bit. At no point is the reviewer concerned with absolutely knowing that your technology is not going to fail. Why? Because we don't know that. You can have the most bulletproof, for sure, amazing technology that has ever been seen, and then some black swan event comes out of nowhere, like COVID, wipes you out, you fail. No one's going to blame a reviewer for that. No one's going to say, really, you gave money to that? They're going to be like, yeah, things happen. So what we're really trying to do is establish a confident proposal that allows a third-party reviewer to believe that, yeah, that like this person knows what they're doing. They have a plan. They know what the next step is. The market makes sense. Like, they've given me enough information that if I did fund this and it failed, no one's going to blame me, because things happen. This is worth a shot. This is worth me taking a crack at. And so really keep that in mind, because as you're writing this, we're looking for ways to quantify numbers and really spoon feed that level of confidence to the reviewer so that they can just take it and be like, yeah, I get it. So you're going to start off with your market opportunity. This is your chance to explain to the reviewer what it is you do and what data do you have to substantiate that it's real, that there's an actual market for your thing. It's not just you and your mom think it's a great idea. It's like, no, there are actual numbers, there's an actual market, and not just that, but there's a real pain, and a pain that we can solve, and a solution that can solve it. Because at the end of this section, we want the reviewer to be like, all right, I believe it. I believe that this is a real pain worth solving. And I believe that it's a market big enough that could be commercialized in. We want them to legitimately believe, even if they don't know you and they don't know if the tech will work, that if it did, the market's big enough to substantiate it. The next logical thing they're going to want to know is, are you the right jockey for the horse? And that's when you get into that company and team. They want to know that you can have the coolest idea in the world, the best idea, but if you have a team that just isn't a team, or doesn't have systems in place, or even from the right people, if a heavy fusion technology and you don't have anyone on your team that has any experience in it, that's going to stand out. So at this point, though, if I believe that the market opportunity is real and the pain's real, and I believe that you're the right team who can actually bring this to market, the next thing I'm going to be worried about is who's going to be upset that you brought this to market. Who are the competitors? Because a market absent competition usually isn't a market. We just have a very efficient, globalized marketplace where all pains have pretty much been solved by something. And so I want to know that you know who are your competitors. And I want to know why you're better than your competitors. And I very much want to know why your competitors aren't just going to steal your idea. Because if you sold me on this is the next billion-dollar idea, why wouldn't your competitors steal it? There is nothing wrong with stealing somebody's idea. Ethically, morally, yes, but legally, unless you have a legal right to prevent someone from taking your idea through a patent, through a trademark, through a trade secret, through a strategy, then telling the world that you just found a gold mine just invites people to want to come mine that gold. So that's what they're looking for. They're looking for making sure that you know who your competition is, how you're better, and what barriers you have to keep them from using this SBIR grant to be R&D for them when they inevitably try to steal it. The last thing, financials. This is where you tie it all together, show that you have the numbers to substantiate your plan. If you do this right, regardless of how technical your concept is or how obvious your concept is, if you can do this right, at the end of this, a reviewer is going to be like, they know their stuff. Like, again, they know they're not going to use this money as tuition to learn these things. They came ready to play. They came with the numbers. They know why it works. And that's what you're trying to shoot for. Keep that in the back of your mind. You're trying to shoot for a level of giving that reviewer the confidence to be like, stamp, give them the money. And again, if it's for some reason it doesn't work out, no one's going to blame me because this was reasonable. A reasonably prudent reviewer would be like, this is worth it. Does this presentation, I'm seeing a thing from Chris in the chat, does this presentation apply to enterprise software services for risk management too? Yeah, yes. This we see all types of stuff, from hardware in fusion reactors to software, AI, digital twinning, and everything between. So yes, everything in here in this presentation today will be applicable to any type of SBIR award that you are applying for. A quick note on the phase 3. So phase 3, sometimes people are less interested in it because there's not direct money tied to it. Like a phase 1, you get money. Phase 2, you get money. Phase 3 is where the DOE will step back and the market steps in. So again, no SBIR funding at this point because the goal is to commercialize your technology using private capital or non-SBIR government contracts. But what's important to know is that getting to this stage can unlock things like leveraging other types of government contracts that will look to the fact that you've completed a phase 2, and that can then allow you to apply for sole source contracts without needing a competitive bid, since it came through the SBIR process. So think of this as focusing on how can you showcase the validation of your prototypes or what you've built in previous phases, and really using this process and this program as credibility tools when talking to investors or utility partners or even strategic buyers. Like, that's the idea at this phase, is that you've gone through the gauntlet and now you have some data to show for it. And because you went through the SBIR process, you have your data rights. Like, you didn't give up any sort of rights to license this further. So if an investor is kind of nervous because you received funding before, you can be like, no, it's okay. The SBIR process still allows you to keep the data rights associated with your technology without worrying about giving it up. That might affect something like a license later on. And now we get into the fun stuff. Now, the rest of the stuff was fun too, I know. Well, let me pause right there. Any questions about anything I covered beyond? Because at this point, we've covered high-level SBIR, what it is, What are the different phases? How is it divided? What makes DOE unique, special kind of mindset? Is there any questions before we jump in now to forward looking of things we might need to plan for? All right. I'm going to take that as a resounding, we are ready. So before we get into, excuse me, before we get into where the puck is going, let's look at the historical data. So over the last decade, the DOE's SBIR topics have followed a relatively stable structure with predictable patterns based on which offices participate in each release and how they flow. So fundamental science and engineering topics from the Office of Science show up in every single release one, making up roughly 40% of total DOE topics. These include areas like physics, chemistry, fusion, high performance computing. Then we have the EERE, the Office of Energy Efficiency, Renewable Energy, which has also shown up every year in Release 2. And these topics typically account for about 30 to 40% of DOE's SBIR topics and include solar, wind, hydrogen, building technologies, transportation efficiency. The remaining 20 to 30% is shared across fossil energy, nuclear, environmental cleanup, nuclear security, fossil energy, carbon management. Those account for like 5 to 10% of each market. Of topics each year. Civilian nuclear energy is about 5% annually. Environmental nuclear security get about 5% too. So what does this mean for you? Historically, if your tech fit within one of these lanes, chances were good that it will be in the future or it'll continue to be funding. And then second, understanding the structure can help you time your proposal correctly because you're not going to aim for like an inverter at release 1 and don't send quantum computing to release 2 because again, the DOE has been remarkably consistent, but now we're going to get into that starting to change under the current political leadership, which we're going to unpack over the next few slides. So let's still talk about my goal isn't to say that everything's about to change, but as best we can do is we can try to predict based on what we've seen in funding requests and legislation proposals, where things are headed. But there's still, we believe at this point, going to be a lot of similar types of needs from technology, but the application of it might change up a bit. And that's what we'll talk about, like how do you address that in your proposals. So let's start with clean energy. So 2015 to 2024, we saw strong and consistent growth when it came to renewables, energy efficient. Grid modernization is a hot subtopic because intermittent renewables become more dominant in utility portfolios, and that starts to throw things off in terms of that grid resiliency. So how can we keep things chugging along? Advanced computing and AI have also seen major expansions, especially through the ASCR program. Topics increasingly focus on AI, machine learning for energy systems, material discovery, climate modeling, quantum information sciences. At the same time, fossil and nuclear energy have remained stable foundations. Fossil topics evolving. So today, they have largely been moved towards like carbon capture, methane detection, emissions reduction, not just extraction. But nuclear has also been a consistent player in this world with advanced reactors and fuel recycling. There's also growing interest in fusion. So this is, again, leading up to now, what we know. And now we trying to figure out what can we guess might come up. So as we pivot into 2025, 2029, and talk about how politics are shaping the funding landscape, especially at the DOE, we can look at things that have been said, funding requests, again, legislative discussions, and as best as we can understand, the current administration has made it clear that their priority, now the new agency's priorities will be low-cost domestic energy, manufacturing competitiveness, and generally moving away from climate-centric initiatives. So this means a rapid shift back towards fossil fuels, nuclear energy, critical mineral development, with a near complete rollback of climate-aligned policy programs like the Paris Agreement, electrification mandates. The budget trend also reflects this. So this is not these predictions, because again, we don't know until they start releasing stuff what they'll do. But our predictions in this slide aren't just based on what the administration has been saying. It's also reflected by budget trends. So there's a proposed 74% cut to the EERE that we previously mentioned, which is the office responsible for renewables, ease, building efficiency. Increased funding is being directed towards fossil energy R&D, nuclear innovation, and energy infrastructure focused on resilience and national security. And ARPA-E, which has been a source of high risk, high reward clean energy R&D, is also facing cuts or structural changes. So at risk, large scale pilots, climate focused acceleration programs, equity based deployment efforts. That said, basic science like physics, AI, material research, and national security programs are being maintained or even expanded. Why? Because they support strategic competitiveness, especially in contrast to some foreign players like China. So the key takeaway is that the funding isn't drying up as much as being reallocated. To succeed in this, you're going to have to reframe your proposal to match those strategic context. So this slide kind of shows, again, where the DOE SBIR puck is headed under the current administration and who's going to be getting funding, who's probably going to be dialing back. As we can see, fossil fuel innovation is back in the spotlight. Oil, gas extraction techs, emission sensors, carbon capture methods. Nuclear energy is receiving new momentum, especially in advanced reactors, isotope production, fuel recycling. Grid security is a rising priority, both cyber and physical resilience, which includes transformer protection, islanding tech, fault-tolerant power electronics. Critical minerals are another big winner. Rare earth alternatives, domestic processing methods, and anything that reduces our reliance on China is very big. On the flip side, obviously, we're seeing reductions in priority of things that like large-scale wind and solar deployment or EV infrastructure, climate-focused programs. So with that said, if you're reading this and you have one of those technologies, it isn't to say that you should panic and abandon your technology. The message here is you need to think about how you're going to reposition your framing so it aligns with what reviewers are now told to prioritize. So let's give you an example. Instead of framing your tech as a climate solution, you'd want to frame it as resilience or cost-saving tools. I give you a real-world example of a client that was during the transition phase of administrations. Their original technology was developed to reduce emissions from long-haul trucking. Obviously, the words that they were using would not fit within the new priorities, so we were able to reframe it as something that extends engine lifespan, that reduces maintenance costs, or improves supply chain stability. Those are all things that technology does. They just weren't highlighted before. Before, it was very much a climate-centric carbon capture reduction of emission types of technology. By reframing it as, no, we're making America stronger, supply chains more resilient, machines last longer, same technology, same business, same funding, different framing allows you to make it through some of these changes in priorities. So really want to emphasize, I can't tell you how many people I talk to that I can tell are stressed out and sometimes even losing hope on their tech being too far into certain programs that are being cut. But because we know where things are headed and because we know where priorities are shifting, it doesn't mean that your technology is obsolete. It just means that it might need a different story. Let me see what else I have. Another thought. So if you are trying to think more broadly towards other technologies, so align your value proposition with anything that the administration values. Domestic energy dominance, any way that you can make your story reflect that. Economic growth, national security, manufacturing leadership. This is the point that you need to tune your instrument to a new key if you fall into that. Won't apply to everybody. There's a lot of people that will still, as is, their proposals will work, but I imagine there are many of you that will need to shift it up if for no other reason than the last 10 years have been fairly predictable in terms of how technologies were being funded. And we anticipate the new topics, which have not yet been released, but will be released shortly, will align with what we've told you or what I've told you right here with kind of shifting towards, again, fossil, nuclear, things like that. I'm seeing John, funding growth areas, grid security. Yes. Okay. We're almost to questions too. Last thing before we get to the questions is take advantage of proposal support. You live in a wonderful state that has wonderful resources, and you should be aware of those resources and actually take advantage, because this is highly competitive money. Any way that you can edge out your competition by having a more thorough story or more well thought application will help you increase the odds of getting funding. And so Nevada offers a few options. So you have the 9-week accelerator that is focused specifically on writing strong SBIR proposals. And there you can get mentorship, proposal structuring, budget planning, help with compliance, even help with grants.gov submission. The goal with that, and Kara, feel free to jump in if I overpromise for you, because I'm in California, so I've only learned what you had by researching it, but it sounds lovely. So the goal with that is to walk out the draft and off, ideally with a fundable proposal. You also have some phase 0 micro grants with up to $5,000 that are reimbursable funds that can cover some proposal costs like consultants, prototyping, travel, things of that sort. You have agency and topic matching support, SBIR speaker series like this. Please attend more of these, and help with getting collaboration with different universities and plugged into the ecosystem. Kara, did I miss anything? Is there any other Nevada resource that I should make sure to mention before we jump into Q&A?
I see that you've got UNR Offices of Economic Development. So through UNR, UNLV, DRI, so the Desert Research Institute, and our partnership together, the Sierra Accelerator for Growth and Entrepreneurship is a group between those that is partnered with us on this. And they specifically help you with NSF project pitches. And then the rest of these services, the accelerators through Startup NV, and the resources, all that information you can find on the website I linked in the chat. But otherwise, that's all great. Thank you, Shaun.
Thank you. All right. With that said, thanks for sticking with me through this. Again, DOE is one of the most powerful funding tools available for scientists and engineers, especially right now, even with things shifting around at a federal level. And to recap, DOE runs on mission alignment and commercialization. You must frame your proposal around, and must with an asterisk. We don't know till they release, but if Vegas takes any bets on this, Kara, my money is on the topics that I listed being the ones we're going to see. So energy security, domestic competitiveness, technical feasibility, and if there's any additional help that I can provide, connect with me on LinkedIn. Please reach out. Always happy to answer any questions that you may have or provide any resources that can be helpful. But with that said, I'm going to open it up to questions and talk about alignment, red flags, anything that you might be asking about. And with that said, I will scroll up to see if I missed any questions. And I'm going to go first to John's question that he asked earlier. The very first topic listed in the most recent DOE SBIR topic from 2025 phase 1 release 2 was malicious event detection, diagnosis, and risk mitigation. Also indicated and associated with infrastructure investment jobs. Do we expect to see this appear in that would be one of the ones that I would imagine seeing, because that one still hits. Yeah. So that make it now, if you don't see it again, I take no responsibility. But the reason is because that is one that has been historically important and very much important right now. And to be honest, between you, me, the several people on this call, and anyone watching the recording, I think the reason that we're seeing delays right now in the topics is because they're trying to figure out how to write them to fit. Because again, you've had 10 years of it being fairly predictable, and now we're going to see big shifts. And so I don't think you can copy paste any primers that they might have had saved. And they're probably, the reason we're seeing delays right now is because they really are making sure to dot their I's, cross their T's, that everything will fit into what we've seen both in funding requests and discussions, financial discussions, administrative disclosures. So yes, the one that you're applying to, malicious event detection, risk mitigation, we've always thought that's important, and that absolutely fits in what we're focused on now, which is going to be, how do we be more secure as a country? How do we secure infrastructure? How do we be more resilient? So I would, again, if Vegas can take odds, that's what we should do next time. We should get some odds on this, and then we can check back later. All right. Does environmental management include food waste? That's a good question. I have seen some food waste topics come through as a extension of like climate impact, methane, like the decomposition of food waste. And so if that's so the long story short, I've seen that topic come through specifically through environmental management. I don't remember if it was that topic or subset, but I've seen those types of technologies come through the program. As we've mentioned, they likely won't make it through under the climate focus, but I could see them coming through under a supply chain food resilience. If your technology has something to do with increasing the health of our lands growing food or preventing any types of buildup of materials that might impact supply chain or our security, food security within the United States, that's probably how I'd frame it. But that's something, feel free to reach out. Give me some more details, what you're noodling around, and then I might be able to provide a better idea of how that would fit in. See, another question. I'm in the process of starting a creator film photography production company. Is there any resource programs or grants that can help me along the way? You're located in Reno, Nevada. So a creator film photography production company. There's two ways to look at your question. At a high level, so first off, from an SBIR perspective, no, there wouldn't be an SBIR grant. There are many other grants that would probably be worth looking into. Why doesn't it apply to SBIR? Because SBIR is generally looking at like an innovative technology of some sort. So if you were coming up with a new type of like film creation or photography technology, that starts to drift in to the SBIR world, but just a film production type company, that's not within the purpose of the program. But there are a lot of grants programs in the arts that go to support the creation of new like media production. But what I would say, and I've run into this a few times, there's always, interesting enough, there's a handful of like documentary film producers that come into these presentations. I would focus more on what is the type of media you are looking to create, and then what grants are available to support that media. So generally, if you want to define it broadly as just, I'm creating a photo film studio, yes, there are grants that just generally support the arts, but the better money is going to be to identify what kind of art are you going to be creating, what kind of information, media productions. If you are going to have, for example, you're going to do documentaries on climate, you're going to do documentaries on energy infrastructure, documentaries on farm production or helping children, like whatever the subset is that you're focusing on. Once you identify that, then you identify the various like family offices and grant providing groups that are interested in amplifying those voices, like amplifying that message. So you define what kind of messaging do I want to create, and then who are the donors or the grant providers that want another person like me to amplify the mission through the creation of that materials. And that's something you can look into. And then, yeah, Kara dropped a great link in the chat on that.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, fantastic advice, Shaun. Anybody who's also in the Reno area, if you aren't already connected to the Innovation Center, they're a makerspace, a co-working facility, local resource. They host all sorts of events, and that would be a great place. They also have like a podcast recording studio and a bunch of fun stuff in the basement. So definitely one to check out, but some awesome advice, Shaun.
Any other questions, comments, curiosities as we arrive up on the hour? Oh, get a copy of the slides. I'm Kara, you're more than welcome to share them. So do you share them, or is that something they should reach out to me?
Yeah, I'm happy to share them if you are okay with that.
Yeah, you know what? Let me make sure I send you the most updated version of the PDF. Then then you can send that out as an email.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
So again, we covered a lot today. My goal is, if you weren't aware of the SBIR program at all, this is a great primer to know the opportunity, because it is an amazing opportunity to get funding for your tech. If you already had awareness, I hope we covered some of the deeper details of strategy. And then obviously, I think the big ticket item for a lot of people is to try to figure out what now, like what next. We're hoping to see those new topics drop by the end of the month is when they've said, but we will see. You can keep checking back follow me on LinkedIn, and I'll be posting updates when I hear new information. And then be sure to connect on LinkedIn. And I'm happy to answer any other questions you might have that you have after the fact. And yeah, I don't see any other questions. So thank you, everybody.
All right, awesome. Shaun, thank you so much for being here and for being our speaker. Thank you everyone for being here. And yes, be sure to connect with Shaun on LinkedIn or his contact information is here. I will send out the deck with all of the information. Thank you all.
Thank you, Shaun.
Take
Thanks.
care, everybody.